Go.
I'm with my grandpa, and he was in World War II, and I'm going to ask him a few questions. And how did World War II begin?
Well, World War II really began in 1940. The German armies invaded Norway and the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and France. On June 23rd, France surrendered to the British, and the British attempted a landing in France called the Battle of Dunkirk. And in 1941, the United States sent armor and supplies to help England. Germany invaded Greece, Yugoslavia, and attempted to take Russia during 1941. On December the 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, a U.S. port in Hawaii, and the U.S. entered the war by declaring war on Japan and Germany. This meant that we were in a war to be fought on two fronts, one in the Pacific and one in the Atlantic. In 1942, the British British and the American troops attacked the Italian forces in North Africa. And in 1943, the British and American started daytime bombings of Germany. And the Allied forces in this same year landed in southern Italy. In 1944, on June the 6th, the Allied forces invaded Normandy in France and also moved into southern France. The 7th Army moved up from the south through Italy into southern France, and the 3rd Army landed in Normandy, and the invasion of the European continent began. In that same year, our forces liberated the Philippines in the Pacific, and the American Air Force began the bombing of Japan. In the invasion of Europe, there were 500 ships involved in this invasion and 1,200 airplanes. There was a chain of airplanes 3 miles wide, unending in the bombing of France to soften up for the landing on Normandy. The German forces made their last ditch attempt to pull the Allies out of Europe with a massive attack on our forces in Belgium. This was known as the Battle of the Bulge. But in the meantime, our forces had crossed France, and we were, in early 1945, the American forces crossed the Rhine River with the drive for Berlin. In 1945, the Germans surrendered. The Americans dropped 2 bombs on Japanese cities, and Japan surrendered. And that's the end of World War II.
Okay. Now, Grandpa, tell me how you were involved in the Second World War. What branch of service were you in, and what was your rank?
I was in the Army, and I had the rank of sergeant.
Okay. When were you in World War II?
I went into World War II in 1941. I served 3 years. I went in late 1941, December 1941, and served 3 years, and was discharged at the end of 1943. Pardon me, 1944, the end of 1944.
Were you in any main battles?
Well, I received 5 battle stars for the European campaign. They divided the European campaign into 5 divisions, and if you were in any of those battle divisions during that time, you were awarded a star for your service in that area. So I had 5 battle stars.
Okay. Where were you stationed, and how did you get there?
Well, first station, when I was inducted into the Army, I was inducted at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and I was sent down to South Texas, down south of Houston, for what we call basic training. I did my basic training 13 weeks there, and then was sent out to Los Angeles, California, to Southern California University, and went into what was called the Army Specialized Training Program. Spent several weeks in that before being sent to a company that was preparing for overseas to Europe. I went from California to New York. I boarded a ship in New York Harbor. In fact, I went over on the Queen Mary, which was one of the largest ships afloat. It took us 7 days, and I landed in northern Scotland, and then went down to southern England.
Okay. What did you do in the war?
Well, our objective mainly was to make sure that all the units had enough personnel that they would be a viable fighting unit. So we supplied the units with people if they had casualties in battle, and we replaced those casualties with fresh troops.
Okay. Were you enlisted or drafted?
Oh, I was drafted. My number come up and they called me.
Okay. Do you think the atomic bomb was useful?
Very much, very useful. It may seem a little cruel. There were lots of people killed with the dropping of the atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, I think it's pronounced. But they can compare to the number of casualties that had taken place. And if we had to invade Japan, that was going to be one of the most deadly battles ever known to man. So it saved a lot of Japanese and American lives, but it did cost the lives of a lot of civilians who lived in those cities.
Okay, and my last question is, what do you remember most?
What do I remember most? Well, I think the invasion was the most impressive thing with me. That was the greatest the greatest number of troops and equipment ever assembled in any war on the invasion of France. I think that is a